Hello, and welcome to our Brownbag session on fair use. This information is for guidance only. It is not legal advice. My name is Jennifer Barrera, Assistant Director for User Services and Chair of the library's Copyright Task Force. My other task force members are here and will introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Kim Scow, and I'm the Coordinator for Access Services.
Hi, I'm Christy Tabers, and I'm the Coordinator for Reference Services.
My name is Joshua Wallace, and I'm an instruction librarian.
Hello, I'm Jody Tennyson, Acquisitions Librarian.
The main objective of our task force is to help the Tarleton community navigate through their copyright questions. We can't tell you if your use is safe under fair use. However, we are happy to assist you in finding guidelines or other tools to help you determine your own fair use case. And we can also help you obtain copyright permission if necessary. Please see the video description for resources referenced within this presentation. But first, what does copyright mean? Copyright, Title 17 of the U.S. Code, is a form of legal protection for intellectual property that allows authors, photographers, composers, and other creators protection for both published and unpublished works. Several rights come along with copyright ownership, such as the exclusive right to, or authorize others to, reproduce the work in whole or in part, prepare derivative works, for example, translations, dramatizations, and musical arrangements, distribute copies of the work by sale, gift, rental, or loan, and publicly perform or display the work. Copyright protects literature, music, paintings, photography, dance, and other forms of creative expression. Here are the criteria for protection under copyright. Number 1, original. A work must be created independently and not copied. Number 2, creative. There must be some minimal degree of creativity involved in making the work. Number 3, a work of authorship. This includes literary, musical, dramatic, choreographic, pictorial, graphic, sculptural, audiovisual, and architectural works. Number 4, fixed. The work must be fixed in a tangible medium of expression. For example, written on paper, saved on a hard drive, or recorded audio-video. Do all copyrighted works display the symbol? The answer is no, and you may notice more works out there without the copyright symbol that are actually copyright protected. On March 1, 1989, the U.S. entered the Berne Convention. The Berne Convention introduced the concept that a copyright exists the moment a work is fixed, rather than requiring registration, as the U.S. required previously. It also enforces a requirement that countries recognize copyrights held by the citizens of all other signatory countries. However, there are benefits to including a copyright notice. It makes it easier for a potential user to track down a copyright owner and legitimately obtain permission to use the work. And it also makes it easier for you to protect your work if someone were to try and claim your copyright as their own. A good copyright notice should contain the word copyright, the copyright symbol with the C inside a circle, the date of publication, and the name of either the author or the owner of all the copyrights in the published work. Here are some examples. As you can see, they do not all include the same elements of copyright identification, but all are valid copyrighted works. Unprotected works include facts and ideas, processes, methods, systems, and procedures, titles, most works produced by federal agencies, with some exceptions, works where copyright was not claimed or was intentionally donated to the public domain, works where copyright has expired. Materials published in the United States prior to 1923 have passed into the public domain. Cornell University maintains a site to help you determine if a work is protected or if it has moved into the public domain. Copyright also has exceptions, such as fair use, which Kim will now discuss.
What is fair use? Fair use is a legal doctrine that permits use of a work without permission of the copyright holder. Fair use supports transformational use of a copyrighted work. So making an exact copy of an item is not transforming it in any way. Transformational use will result in an item that is different from the original. So if you start with A, you cannot end with A. It has to transform into something different, like B. There are no hard rules. Like free speech, it is open to interpretation. Gretchen McCord, a librarian and lawyer who specializes in copyright, explains fair use best. She says, in general, fair use is not the law. It's your defense. If you enter a lawsuit for copyright infringement, your defense will be fair use. There are 4 factors to consider when trying to determine if you are following fair use guidelines. First, the purpose and character of your use. Has the material you've taken from the original work been transformed by adding a new expression or meaning? Was value added to the original by creating new information, new aesthetics, new insights, and understandings? Second is the nature of the copyrighted work. There is generally more leeway if you're pulling factual information from works as opposed to copying information from a fictional work. The third factor is the amount and substantiality of the portion taken. In theory, the less you take, the more likely it is to fall under fair use in general, but it's not a promise. You cannot take the heart of the work. Even if the entire document is 200 pages and you only use 10, if the court determines that that content was the most important factor, you could lose your argument of fair use. The fourth and final factor is the effect of the use upon the potential market. So, is your new work depriving the original copyright owner income? Does the new work act as a substitute for the original? This would take away from potential profit from the original copyright holder and does not qualify as fair use. A helpful tool I found is the Fair Use Checklist created by Columbia University, which helps determine if something qualifies as fair use. The checklist provides columns with checkboxes that favor and oppose fair use. This will give you a visual idea of how likely what you're using falls under fair use. Now I'm going to hand it off to Jody, who will talk to you more about films in the classroom.
Educational use is permissible, such as using a DVD to a classroom of students. However, using a DVD at a series of seminars is not permissible. The material must be legally acquired for classroom use, and the instructor must be present during the showing. Movies can be shown in the classroom. Fair use is limited to small portions of copyrighted materials, and you use them for comments and teaching. Keep in mind that when you stream movies, you are identified by your personal user account and your employer by the IP address. To follow fair use, you need to be able to tie what you are showing to education. You must obtain performance rights if the viewing is open to the public, if it's held in a public space, and those attending are in an organization or club. School-wide activities team, also known as SWAT at Tarleton, frequently show free movies on campus for public viewing. This is a one-time showing, and they do require performance rights with the rental. This cost varies according to how long the movie has been out and how popular it is. According to SWAT, the cost varies from $70 to $700. You do not have to obtain performance rights if an instructor is showing the film to registered students in class, it's over a closed circuit system, and where the content of the film is for instructional purposes. All material used must be acquired lawfully. Do not use pirated or illegal copied materials. I had a recent inquiry regarding a new Netflix documentary that they wanted to use in the classroom. After contacting Netflix, it was ascertained that for this particular documentary, they did allow a one-time educational screening and referred me to the Grant of Permission for Educational Screenings page. Always check what our library offers. We have Films on Demand, Vanderbilt Television News Archive Index, Project Muse, Counseling and Therapy and Video, EBSCO, and Canopy. Our library is copyright compliant with these vendors. Films on Demand provides online streaming access to documentaries, educational films, and newsreels to students, faculty, and staff in a classroom setting. Canopy videos can be watched for class individually or in a group forum and is not for commercial benefit. Now I'll turn the program over to Christy for copies in the classroom.
I'm going to go over some quick guidelines for distributing copies in the classroom. When you are considering whether or not to make copies for your classroom, you should start with the 4 factors that Kim discussed earlier. Those 4 factors are purpose and character, nature, amount and substantiality of the portion taken, and effect on potential market. While all of these factors are important, you need to focus specifically on factor 3 when making your decision because of its heavier weight in the case of fair use in copies. There also should be a clear connection between the items that are being copied and the pedagogical purpose. So you really want to make sure that the topic that you are teaching aligns with that copy that you're distributing into the classroom. Here are some examples of what you can copy and distribute in the classroom. A complete poem if less than 250 words, or an excerpt of no more than 250 words from a longer poem. A complete article, story, or essay if less than 2,500 words, or an excerpt from any prose work of no more than 1,000 words, or 10% of the work, whichever is less. One chart, graph, or diagram per book or per periodical issue to illustrate a point, or a chapter out of the book. In these cases, less is more for your defense. Here are some examples of what's unacceptable to copy and distribute in the classroom. A whole textbook or book, an entire journal, multiple articles from one journal, or entire academic course packs. The good news is that there are some great alternatives available to distributing copies in the classroom. One thing you can do is add permalinks in your Blackboard courses to link to articles you want your students to read. Josh will talk about this more in a moment. You can also utilize the library's course reserves and e-reserve services. So for example, you can place an entire book on reserve, which Kim will talk about later. And now I'm going to pass this over to Josh.
Now let's talk about copyright and Blackboard. Digital materials are covered by copyright and fair use applies. It's very easy to download a PDF of an article from a database and then upload it onto your Blackboard page. But it's important to remember that when you do that, you've made a copy of that item. So here are some guidelines to keep in mind when you are uploading copyrighted materials to your Blackboard page. First of all, only use legally acquired materials. The materials you use must be relevant to your course, and faculty members are the ones who determine if the material is relevant to their course or not. You should restrict access to only students who are enrolled in the course, and you should block access to those materials after the course has ended. You should also include a copyright notice to all copyrighted materials that you upload to your Blackboard page. Links are not covered by copyright. Therefore, it is preferable to link to materials rather than to upload them directly to your course Blackboard page. If you want to link to an item found in a library database, then you should look for the permalink icon in the item's record. This screenshot shows the location of the permalink icon in EBSCO databases. Once you click on that icon, the link will appear at the top of the page. You can copy and paste that link to your Blackboard course. On this slide, there are 3 screenshots showing the steps for adding a permalink to your Blackboard course. From your Blackboard page, click the Build Content tab, and then click the Web Link option. In the Create Web Link module, type in a name for the link. You can name it whatever you like. Then paste the permalink into the URL field and click Submit. The screenshot in the bottom right corner shows how it will look from the student's view. Students click the link in Blackboard and it takes them to the item's record in the library database. If they are off campus, they will need to enter their NTNet username and password to access it. Now let's look at some guidelines for particular types of sources. For books and articles, many of the same guidelines that apply to making copies in the classroom apply to Blackboard too. So you can upload a portion of a book for one semester onto your Blackboard page, and you can upload an article for one semester on your Blackboard page. If you go beyond this, you should seek permission from the copyright holder. Images are a little more complicated. The guideline is that a work can only be displayed on Blackboard for a time that is comparable to a classroom session. Digital music and film are complicated too. It's better to link to the source rather than stream them directly from your Blackboard course. Now I'm going to hand off to Kim, who's going to talk about reserves in the library.
Faculty members are allowed to place items on reserve in the library for student use. This includes physical items like books, DVDs, or CDs, as well as electronic items. To abide by copyright, your best bet is to put a purchased item on reserve. You are allowed to lend a legally obtained copy of an item. Lending your copy is not the same as making a second copy for someone else. Similarly, if the library owns a copy, you can request that item be placed on reserve. There are rules that must be followed, though, when using course reserves. Items can only be placed on reserve the semester the course is being taught. The library cannot keep items for courses that are not offered that semester. Also, a new contract must be submitted each semester, stating the course information being taught, as well as providing bibliographic information of the items. The faculty member will also check off on the contract how their use complies with copyright, be it a personal copy or fair use, etc. Items that are not renewed for the upcoming semester will be returned to the department. Do not place copies of materials on reserve unless the instructor, the library, or another department of the university possesses a lawfully obtained copy. We cannot place illegally obtained copies on reserve, such as burned DVDs. And finally, when submitting someone else's work to reserves, like an example paper a student has written the semester prior, please include complete bibliographic citation information and a copyright statement, if there is one. Using the provisions of fair use, the total amount of material on reserve for a class should be a small portion of the total assigned reading for that class. Complete or longer works, such as entire books, will not be placed on e-reserves. Materials are available only to the Tarleton State University community, and all users are expected to adhere to copyright and fair use guidelines. There are instances when you do not need publisher permission to put an item on reserve. This includes physical books, a single copy of a chapter or an excerpt from a book, photocopies of a single journal or newspaper article, and lastly, materials authored by the instructor, such as exams, lecture notes, and syllabi. So when do you need copyright permission? You'll need it when an instructor needs an article from a journal for more than one semester, when multiple articles from one journal issue are needed. These situations are actually when we need to look into purchasing that journal title specifically. Also, when an instructor needs one chapter of a book for more than one semester, when multiple chapters of a book are needed, or when the book is out of print. There are multiple ways to obtain copyright permission. You can write to the copyright holder, which is usually the publisher. You can also pay a fee to the Copyright Clearance Center. Fees may vary, but most fees are around $25 plus the annual account fee of $105. The library actually has an account with the Copyright Clearance Center, so through reimbursement, we can assist with submitting payment using our subscription. There are two types of library reserves. First are the course reserves kept at the circulation desk. The faculty member gets to pick which loan period they would like: 2 hours, overnight, 2 days, and 7 days. Students will pick up the items at the circulation desk and check out with their Tarleton ID or a photo ID. E-reserves are available to students by going through our online catalog using a faculty-assigned username and password. There are more restrictions with e-reserves. Faculty members must create a new password each semester. They cannot repeat a password each semester because prior students need to be cut off from accessing the material. So changing the password each semester ensures that only current students have access to the materials. Also, to ensure access to the correct students, library staff cannot give students the password to access the e-reserve. The instructor is responsible for ensuring that students have the correct login information, since they are the ones who know who their students are. To help protect faculty and the library staff load a copyright statement into the documents on e-reserve so students are aware that they are responsible for upholding copyright. Now I'll turn it over to Jennifer to explain how interlibrary loan complies with copyright.
Most people don't associate their interlibrary loan requests with copyright or understand how it works, but your requests do come into play. The library follows a couple of the fair use guidelines. The rule of 2. It sets a limit on the user. Libraries may provide 1 article per issue per patron without requesting copyright permission. For the second and subsequent copies, we must request copyright permission or pay copyright fees. In 1978, the National Commission on New Technological Uses of Copyright Works, Con 2, established the Rule of 5 for requesting libraries. Libraries can request up to 5 articles from the same journal title that were published in the last 5 years. Requesting and receiving 6 or more articles from a single journal title in a calendar year requires us to pay copyright fees to lawfully obtain the article. The library will pay the first $10 of the copyright charges on interlibrary loans through our copyright clearance account, but we do require that our users pay the difference. And fair use does not allow us to request an item on interlibrary loan to be placed on course reserve. Interlibrary loan is intended for use by the individual only and not to be distributed. When you receive your article electronically via your interlibrary loan ILLiad account, don't wait too long to retrieve it. To comply with copyright and fair use, these documents are deleted after 30 days. Con 2 guidelines are intended to assure that interlibrary loan does not become a substitute for the purchase of a journal by a library. At the end of every year, we submit a list of the most requested journal titles to the periodical and electronic resources librarian for purchase consideration. We maintain records of every item requested on interlibrary loan for 3 years plus the current year to comply with Con 2. And again, this is a guideline, not the law. However, most libraries have adopted Con 2 guidelines as standard practice. We want to thank you all for listening to our Brownbag session. We are happy to guide you in the right direction regarding your copyright questions. Like I said before, we can't give you legal advice, but we can provide resources for you to make your own fair use case. Email us anytime with your copyright questions at mylibrary@tarleton.edu.